And I wanted to say I'm very pleased to be here to speak to the Natural History Society tonight. Um, the Maryland Ornithological Society was founded in 1945 as a spin-off of the Natural History Society. So I think it's very fitting that our two societies and organizations continue to work together, and I thank you for inviting me to speak. So tonight I'm talking about the sanctuaries owned by the Maryland Ornithological Society. As you'll see, we have 10 of them. They are located across the state. This shows the names of the sanctuaries and the counties that they're located in. We have 3 in Garrett County, 1 in Frederick, 1 in Prince George's, 1 in Anne Arundel, 2 in Talbot, 1 in Caroline, and 1 in Somerset. Altogether, they protect almost 3,000 acres across the state. And what we're going to do is to visit these sanctuaries one by one, working our way pretty much from west to east, but we're also going to go back in history a little bit to talk about how they came to be MOS sanctuaries. So this is a map that shows the locations of the sanctuaries. And as you can see, and as the previous slide showed, they are literally located across the state. The 3 in Garrett County, here's our 1 in Frederick, 1 in Anne Arundel, 1 in Prince George's, 3 in the mid-shore of the eastern shore, and 1 way down south on the eastern shore. So we're going to be visiting these one by one. How it all started. So I already mentioned that MOS was founded in 1945. From almost the very first days of the Maryland Ornithological Society, the members had been talking about their desire to have sanctuaries, private sanctuaries owned by MOS that would serve as preserves for birds and other wildlife, and that the members could use for bird walks and studies and so on. They were talking about it, but nothing happened until 1955, when there was a little kickstart to the program. A man named Mr. John Besson donated $500 to start the MOS Sanctuary Fund. And this photo is taken from an old issue of Maryland Birdlife. It shows the then president of MOS on the left receiving the check for $500. But a sad note, Mr. Besson was ill at the time, and he himself was not able to attend this presentation ceremony, so he's not in the photo. A funny thing is that he was not even a member of MOS, but he gave the money to MOS in honor of his sister Adele. She had recently passed away. She was a great nature lover. And although they weren't MOS members, both John and Adele had many friends who were in MOS. They owned property in Anne Arundel County on the Chesapeake Bay, and they would often host bird walks for their Maryland Ornithological Society members. So they became very fond of the society, and as I said, Mr. Besson gave this gift in honor of his twin sister Adele. He passed away just a month after this check was presented to MOS. But it did kickstart the MOS Sanctuary Program. MOS chapters throughout the state, there weren't as many then as there are now, but MOS chapters that in existence at the time began feverishly looking for land that would be suitable for a sanctuary. So one of the things, even though there was a lot of searching for a sanctuary, there wasn't much written in the early MOS logs about why the members wanted to have a sanctuary. Everybody agreed that they should, but they didn't really write down anything about why they wanted them until 1960. And at that time, Chandler Robbins, who was one of the leaders of MOS, he was serving as the editor of Maryland Birdlife. He was the long-serving editor. He served until I think it was 2015 when my husband, Gene Scarpula, took over as editor. So anyway, Chandler Robbins was a leader of the society, and in 1960, soon after MOS acquired its first sanctuary, he wrote an editorial in Maryland Birdlife addressing the question of why MOS wanted to have sanctuaries. I don't usually like to have slides that have a lot of words on them, but I think Chan Robbins' words are so important in giving direction to the MOS Sanctuary Program and in helping to understand why it is what it is, that I want to read a quote from his editorial. He said, We have a fine, secluded tract on which to relax and enjoy the world about us, a tract to which we can retreat from the noise and smells of the city. We have unpolluted streams in which we can study animals that once were more widely distributed through our state. We can conduct group projects and carry on individual studies on a great variety of birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, or insects. We can have family outings and club field trips. So Chan was envisioning a very active sanctuary that would have people on it enjoying it. And note that although the impetus for having the sanctuaries was bird conservation, other animals could also be studied. It wasn't just about birds. Chan went on to say, but more than this, we have an opportunity at very modest cost to the society to provide educational facilities, not only for our own membership, but also for the Maryland public. The hobby from which we derive so much enjoyment can be converted into a tool for sowing the seeds of conservation, so that more of Maryland's citizens will learn to appreciate the natural areas of our state, and in turn help to preserve more of these areas for the enjoyment of future generations. This is our great challenge. So with these words, Chan really set the direction for the entire MOS Sanctuary program. The 3 points that Chan calls out in his mission statement, as I call it, for the sanctuaries are preservation and protection of land, education and research, and recreation. These are sanctuaries that people should use and enjoy, and also learn from and share with others. So the very first sanctuary actually is, ironically, no longer an MOS sanctuary. It was called Rock Run, and it was located in what was now Susquehanna State Park in Harford County. It was acquired in 1960 and functioned as an MOS sanctuary until 1976. It consisted of 57 acres, mostly wooded, that included a historic home, shown here. This is a photo from Maryland Birdlife of that era. Maryland Birdlife is the MOS scientific journal. And in the early days, it carried many articles about the sanctuaries that were being acquired. And this house, or what is left of it, as you will learn, there were some issues with the house, is actually on the Maryland Inventory of Historic Places. MOS never owned this property. It was leased from a private landowner. This is before the state park was formed. It was leased from a private landowner, Mr. Gilman Paul, for $10 a month, $120 a year. Princely sum. And this just shows where it was located. The outline looks sort of like a grand piano plopped down right in the middle of what is now Susquehanna State Park. This is the Susquehanna State Park trail map. So when you go there, you can walk through what used to be the MOS Sanctuary. There were a lot of things that MOS used Rock Run for. The Harford chapter, the Harford Bird Club, used it for their monthly meetings as well as picnics and bird walks and all sorts of other activities. All of the MOS chapters immediately started scheduling field trips there, as well as other groups, such as the Natural History Society, classroom, children's class visits, and so on. There was a bird banding program there, winter bird feeding. It's a funny thing. When I went back and read about the history of the sanctuaries, everybody in MOS thought it was important to feed birds through the winter. They really felt that this would help bird survival. We now know not so much. It's really more about us being able to see the birds. But all of the sanctuaries that were acquired included often elaborate bird feeders, like this huge one that was built at Rock Run. It held 50 pounds of seed. Bird lists were created for the property. There were trails built and marked, often by volunteers that were outside of MOS. People like Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts came and helped out. A study grid for doing scientific studies was laid out by Chan Robbins and his children. His 4 children were put to work on this. And I'll be mentioning Chan Robbins quite a bit throughout this talk. I just want to pause and make sure everybody knows who he was. Chan was a biologist at the Patuxent Wildlife Research Center. He spent his whole career there. He was a professional ornithologist. He was a prolific author, a prolific scientist. He passed away in 2017. To the general public, he's probably most famous as the person who banded what is considered to be the oldest living wild bird in the world. It's Wisdom the albatross, who nests on the Midway Atoll. Chan banded her in 1954 when she was about 8 years old. She is still alive and reproducing today. So she is considered the oldest bird. And as I say, Chan banded her and rebanded her some years later. Chan was also the person who developed the protocols for the Maryland breeding birds, well, the North American Breeding Bird Survey, the Maryland Breeding Bird Atlas, which then spread to other states and in fact to other countries, and many other scientific studies that are still ongoing. So Chan was, as I said earlier, one of the leaders of MOS, and I'll be mentioning him quite a few times as we talk about our sanctuary program. And there were nature education camps as well at Rock Run. So Rock Run was a busy place in its heyday. However, we don't have it anymore as a sanctuary. The house was quite isolated. In those days, that rural area of Harford County was really difficult to get to. We're talking gravel roads that were closed in the winter because of snowfall. And it was so isolated that there was repeated vandalism to the house, which was pretty much uncontrollable. The landlord, Mr. Paul, died in 1973, and the following year, the state of Maryland purchased his land and the house that MOS had been using to become part of Susquehanna State Park. Even after it was acquired as a state park, MOS continued to lease 1 acre and the house for a couple of more years. But then vandals again got into the house and set a fire that almost totally destroyed it. So at that point, MOS walked away and relinquished the lease and left it to the state. So it was a shame. MOS really missed having that sanctuary, but just a year later, MOS acquired another sanctuary that, again, ironically, is no longer with us. There were 3 sanctuaries in addition to Rock Run that have come and gone over the years. Tumsuden was a property that was bequeathed to MOS in 1976. It consisted of this little house, and it sat on 1.5 acres adjacent to Harford Glen Nature Education Center, which is used by the Harford County Public School System as a nature education training center for teachers and students. So this little facility served the Harford Bird Club as a replacement for the Rock Run Sanctuary. But this structure also had vandalism problems over the years, and upkeep was difficult. So in 1994, MOS gifted Tumsuden to Harford Glen Nature Education Center. Another former MOS property was the Adventure Sanctuary in Montgomery County. This was a 14-acre property that was active as an MOS sanctuary from 1969 to 2008. It included an indoor nature center that you can see in the photo way back here. This was originally a private home of the owner, Alice Hostetler, and after her death, it was converted to a nature center. It was her great wish that her property would become a place where people could come to see and learn about nature. So she created a 3-way trust to administer her property. The trust involved MOS, Hood College, and Montgomery County Parks as co-trustees. But eventually, even though MOS was very active there for quite a few years and had a very prolific bird banding program, eventually, with the deaths of some of the principal volunteers that MOS had there, MOS became no longer interested in the property, and it's now managed solely by the Montgomery County Parks Department. Another former MOS sanctuary still is known as Hancock's Resolution in Anne Arundel County. This is a historic property that at the time that MOS had it was leased from Historic Annapolis Incorporated on a trial basis. This was in 1970 and 1971. It consisted of a historic home along with outlying farm buildings, and it was in very bad shape, literally falling apart. As part of the MOS contract with Historic Annapolis, MOS was supposed to restore the house and some of the other buildings, but MOS found quickly that they didn't really have the resources to do that, and just like some of the other properties, this one was subject to repeated vandalism. So it was one step forward and three steps back with trying to maintain this property. So MOS relinquished the lease. It's now operated by the county as a historic site that's open to the public. And it's operated as a colonial farm. So they do reenactments there and show how farmsteads of that era were operated. But here we see a photo, a historic photo of the first sanctuary that MOS purchased. This is the Carey Run Sanctuary. We still have it. It was purchased, the original purchase was in 1962. This photo was taken from the cover of Maryland Birdlife in December of 1962. And when one reads about how Carey Run was acquired, it's quite breathtaking. MOS wasted no time. Remember that John Besson gave that $500 in 1955. And up until 1962, that money sat in a fund unused because MOS made no purchases. But in 1962, a scouting party finally found property that looked like it was going to be a good place for MOS to buy a sanctuary. It was an abandoned farm in Garrett County. So there was a lot of searching that went on, and they came up with this property, which appeared on the cover of Maryland Birdlife. I believe, if I remember the timeline correctly, I believe that the search party identified this property in August of 1962. By November of 1962, the sale had been finalized, and this photo appeared on the cover of the December issue of Maryland Birdlife that year. And the house is still standing. This photo was taken by our house caretaker, Melissa Hensel, a local volunteer out in Garrett County in summer of 2021, and the house had just gotten a new, very spiffy metal roof. And I'm just going to go back to the old photo. You notice the difference in the trees. The trees have really grown up around the house and truly all over the sanctuary. So let me show you where Carey Run is located. This is Garrett County in the far northwest corner of Maryland. And Carey Run is located on the eastern side of Garrett County, very near the Allegheny-Garrett County line, which runs down this way. It's near the town of Frostburg. So as I mentioned, when MOS founded, it was an abandoned farm that consisted of 52 acres with a house shown in the photos and numerous outbuildings. Most of those outbuildings have been removed. MOS made the first purchase in 1962. The price was $4,000, for which MOS paid cash. They raised that sum between August and November when they purchased the property. It was a blitz of fundraising. There was an additional 110 acres added to the sanctuary in 1973. Again, this was an outright purchase, although this time MOS put up half of the purchase price, $40,000 in cash, and the other half was mortgaged, but the mortgage was paid off in 3 years. Again, this required a great deal of fundraising. Every MOS chapter provided a donation, as well as many individual members. And other organizations throughout the state, but particularly in Garrett County, also chipped in. School children in Garrett County had little, piggy banks in their classrooms where they put their pennies and nickels, and that helped to pay for Carey Run. So I just wanted to show you some side-by-side photos of what it looked like back in 1962 versus now. This is the driveway, the entrance driveway in 1962. This is that same scene now. And of course, what you see we have trees now, but this is the fence. You can still see the fence line. The fence still exists. Here's another side-by-side pair of photos just showing a hillside, which was, at the time, the far hill was mostly field. The near hill, which is part of Carey Run, is still field, but that back field has now grown over into forest. So there's been a lot of changes in the ensuing 60-some years. Carey Run has a long history, dating back to pre-Revolutionary War times. The southern boundary of the property follows what is called the Old Braddock Road. This was used by General Braddock to move his troops west out of Maryland into West Virginia and Ohio during the French and Indian War in the 1750s. The house itself was built in 1887 from white pine that was cut on the land itself. It was a working farm. the farmers grew over the years potatoes, oats, corn, strawberries, and there was an orchard. But eventually, the farmers who owned it, and there were many, many owners over the years, eventually it was abandoned because of the cold, snowy winters. It was just too difficult to get out there to take care of the farm. These photos show we have a nature trail on what was the old Braddock Road. The nature trail was constructed by an Eagle Scout for his Eagle Scout project. And the trail, which is about 2.5 miles long, has about 24 stations that have signs that tell the story not only of General Braddock's use of the road, but also the natural history of the area and in Native American lore associated with this area. So Carey Run is really interesting for the naturalist. It sits at an elevation of 2,500 feet. Carey Run itself is a stream that's a tributary of the Savage River. You cross the Savage River just before entering the sanctuary. Hefner Run is another stream in the sanctuary. It is a tributary of Carey Run, and there are numerous other small streams. There is a freshwater pond that MOS created by damming a portion of Carey Run. There are old fields that are mown annually in order to maintain them as habitat for sparrows and other grassland and scrub breeders. There are hemlock woods, as well as white pine and Douglas fir, and also deciduous woods. And the deciduous woods are dominated by trees such as wild cherry, maple, and oak. There is a small lawn area that's adjacent to the house. In the first days of Carey Run, it was a very busy place, much like Rock Run. There were lots and lots of activities. The Allegheny chapter used, the local bird club out there used it for their annual picnic and lots of bird walks. There was the required winter bird feeding, and here you see a young person who's filling a bird feeder with snow on the ground. And getting out to Carey Run when there was a snowstorm, was no easy feat. We're talking about very mountainous territory, and sometimes the snow could be 6 feet deep. Girl Scout and Boy Scout camps were held there. Those campers, the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, helped to do a lot of work at the sanctuary for their projects. Frostburg University and the local community colleges brought their ornithology classes there, and elementary school classes also visited. So these photos are historic photos that show some of these activities at the sanctuary, including adult birding weekends. And here you see some MOS members enjoying one of those at a picnic table that's still there on the lawn by the house. Nowadays, it's still a busy place. These are some recent photos. MOS members can stay at the house overnight. There's also camping on the grounds for MOS members. There's an annual spring workday where everybody gathers to spruce up the place. There are nest boxes. I do not know how many nest boxes there are, but there's quite an extensive collection of nest boxes for bluebirds and other cavity nesters. There are research projects that are hosted there. Dr. Chuck Hager, one of our local members out there, he's a dentist. And this is him right here, helping to plant some trees at Carey Run a couple falls ago. But he runs a junior nature camp for a week every summer. And we've also held blitzes with the Maryland Entomological Society, which this photo is showing. And this is Sue Muller during that same bio-blitz with the Maryland Entomological Society, doing light nighting for moths and other nocturnal insects. And this is another tree planting photo from I've lost track of time, fall of 2020, I think it was. This shows the extent of our property at Carey Run. There are 3 sections, A, B, and C. The original section was A down here, and this map shows the original portion of the sanctuary. And then B and C are the 110 acres that were added at a later time. The land plots out there are mostly laid out in a checkerboard pattern of about 50 acres per square. And so we added these 2 squares at a later date. We have an extensive trail system that pervades all 3 of these sections. Carey Run hosts a number of really interesting breeding birds, and I'm not going to read the list, but if you're a birder and you just glance down it, you'll see that there are great birds out there indeed. Being in the mountains of western Maryland, many of these birds are not breeding birds in our area of the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. corridor. So you'll find things out there like breeding blue-headed vireos and alder flycatchers. And we used to not have common ravens here, but we have them now. This photo shows a nest with great horned owls, very near the house at Carey Run. Currently, we are having an issue that I wanted to mention. We have hemlock woolly adelgids that are attacking the hemlock stands. We have about 40 acres of hemlocks in several separate woodlots at Carey Run. Hemlock woolly adelgids are an invasive exotic insect that was introduced to the United States from Asia, and unfortunately, they kill hemlock trees. In this country, they have no natural predators. We estimate that 90%, perhaps all of our trees at Carey Run are infested. So we're looking into control programs. There are chemical pesticides that are used to control these, as well as predatory insects that are all, the predatory insects themselves are not native to our area. So we want to approach this with great care. We've been consulting with Dr. Mike Ropp at the University of Maryland. Many people know him as the bug guy. He has the weekly bug, is it Bug a Day? His Bug a Day website, or is it Bug a Week? I don't remember. Anyway, we're currently working on formulating a plan to control these insects at Carey Run, because losing our hemlock forests would be really devastating. The insects suck the juices from the trees, and the trees become decimated and lose their needles. And they have this candlestick appearance that they develop when they're infested. So just some parting shots of Carey Run to show you what a beautiful place it is. I'm not going to narrate what they are. The idea is just to show how pretty it is out there and all the different habitats we have. I will mention, this is our state butterfly, the Baltimore checker spot, and we do have a small number of these butterflies that breed at Carey Run. We have host plants there for them. So Carey Run's a beautiful place, and we have 10 sanctuaries. And it's hard to say if I have a favorite, but Carey Run is certainly dear to my heart. I guess that's the way I'll put it. We have two other sanctuaries in Garrett County, and the next one we're going to visit is the Caroline Wilson Sanctuary. And it is located, I didn't mean to do that. It is located southwest of Carey Run. It's actually south. This is Deep Creek Lake here, and Caroline Wilson is south of Deep Creek Lake in quite a rugged area of the county. Caroline Wilson Sanctuary consists of 86 wooded acres that were acquired by MOS in 1988. This property was transferred to us from the Nature Conservancy, and in turn, the Nature Conservancy acquired it from the family of Caroline Wilson following her death. The Wilson family is a very old family in Garrett County. They go back to Revolutionary War times. They settled in Garrett County right after the Revolutionary War. And in fact, the nearest local little village is named Wilson. So they were a prominent family. They were and are a prominent family in Garrett County. Caroline Wilson owned this property, and her family decided to leave it to the Nature Conservancy after she passed away. It consists of the wooded stream valley of the Little Youghiogheny River. And this property is surrounded by farms and a few residential lots. It does have a modest trail system through it, but it has very nice habitat inside. This satellite image shows the property. The property is here. I'm tracing the outline, and you can see it's kind of an irregular wedge shape with a notch out of it. This property is landlocked. It's one of the unusual features of this sanctuary. So this curved border line of the sanctuary is not a road. That's a railroad track. The sanctuary does not sit on any roads. So to get to it, we park by the railroad tracks, and then we walk the tracks, and eventually you get to the sanctuary and you make your way very carefully down the railroad embankment where you can reach this old road system that runs the length of the sanctuary. It's primarily wooded. The Little Youghiogheny River flows through its heart, and there is a boggy area down at the south end of the sanctuary. The land down here, by the way, to the south of the Caroline Wilson Sanctuary is owned by the Deer Park Water Company, and they have a reservoir there. It's a spring-fed reservoir. That's where Deer Park water comes from. And that land is leased to a hunting club. So they're our neighbors. This is a private farm. Excuse me, I have to continually sip water, otherwise my voice will give out. So these are some scenes of what the Caroline Wilson habitat looks like. Here are the railroad tracks that we walk in on. You go around the curve, and this is looking down the embankment into the sanctuary. Again, looking down the embankment. We're on the edge of the embankment here. But this is the old road system, and you can see once you get down there, it's quite easy walking on this old road. It does cross a few streams. There used to be wooden bridges crossing the streams. The bridges are long gone, but we're able to cross on foot because the streams are pretty small. Caroline Wilson and the area hosts some interesting breeding birds. I should mention that these breeding bird lists that I'm showing are taken from the Maryland Breeding Bird Atlas, and they show breeding birds that breed in the atlas block in which the sanctuary is located. So not all of these records would have come from the sanctuary itself, but they are representative of the area where the sanctuary is located. So again, some great birds that are representative, distinctive birds of Western Maryland breed in this area. And the photo here shows a ruffed grouse, which do occur at the sanctuary. Just some additional photos showing the habitats at Caroline Wilson. You can see the understory is quite dense in many places. There's a little conifer lot down at the south end of the sanctuary. Conifers here too. And that's a possum peering out of those dark woods back there. A little possum back there. The newest sanctuary that MOS has is called the Chandler and Eleanor Robbins Sanctuary at Red Run. There's Chandler Robbins again. I told you we'd be meeting him again. It consists of 45 acres. It's almost totally wooded, except that there is a mountain bog in the heart of it that is fed by Red Run Stream. And the wooded portion has both deciduous trees and conifers, including hemlocks. This sanctuary also has the woolly adelgid problem. So this property was originally privately purchased by Chan and Eleanor in March of 1967. They had visited the area when Chan was doing some research out in Western Maryland, and they liked the property. They purchased it to save the habitat because they recognized how important and distinctive the habitat was. They never intended to build on this property, so there is no house or other building on the property. When Eleanor passed away in 2008, I think it was, and then Chan himself passed in spring of 2017, their 4 children decided that the only thing they wanted to do with this property was to give it to MOS. So they gifted the land to MOS in 2017. And the Chan Robbins Sanctuary is located in the north middle part of Garrett County. It's just north of Route 40 and Interstate 68 up near the Pennsylvania line. So it has some particular ecological significance. Red Run is the stream that flows through the sanctuary that feeds the mountain bog that exists there. The headwaters of Red Run are in Wolf Swamp to the south. And Wolf Swamp may ring a bell with some of you naturalists in the audience. It used to be a Nature Conservancy property. The Nature Conservancy has now turned it over to the state, but as you probably know, the Nature Conservancy specializes in properties that host rare species. The reason that this is such an interesting ecological area is that it's a relict of the last ice age, 15,000 years ago. There are plants and animals that are found in this area, both Red Run and Wolf Swamp, that are typically found much farther north in this country. So in the 1980s and 1990s, DNR biologists, Maryland DNR, Department of Natural Resources, biologists from there identified 2 rare species at Red Run. These are the 2-spotted skipper, shown in this photo at the top right, and white-fruited mountain rice, shown at the bottom right. The skipper is a state endangered insect, and the mountain rice is a state threatened. plant. So when our friends at Maryland DNR heard that MOS had acquired this property, they were really happy. DNR didn't have the resources to acquire it themselves, so they were glad that MOS got it. So this satellite image shows the outline of the land that MOS owns at Red Run. You can see the bog and the stream that goes through the middle of part of the sanctuary. There are other streams that feed that bog. And we have one major trail that comes. This white dotted line is a private lane that we have access to. There's parking along the lane, and one can walk the trail down to the bog. And this is a photo of the bog. It is really a magnificent area. It's a sunlit area, just drenched in sunlight, surrounded by these dark woods, and it's really spectacular, loaded with breeding swamp sparrows as well as other birds, and lots of insects. And this is the wooded habitat that surrounds the bog. There are great birds that breed in this area. Again, I'm not going to read the whole list, but there are 82 breeding species found in this atlas block. The photo is blue-headed vireo. And here's some more photos of the habitat. This photo has been enhanced to emphasize the trail that runs through the woodlands, but you can see the woods are very, very rich. They have a nice understory. We do not allow deer hunting on this property. However, there is very active deer hunting on surrounding private lands, so the deer herd is under pretty good control. So there's not really a problem with overbrowse here too much. And here's another photo of the bog surrounded by the woodlands. Moving on, we're working our way from west to east, and we hit Frederick County, where MOS has a small sanctuary called Seymour Cooper. This is located, again, up near the Pennsylvania line, north of the town of Thurmont and north of Frederick, the city of Frederick. Seymour Cooper Sanctuary is just 14 acres. If you look at a Google map, you'll see that Google has it labeled as, I think, the Seymour B. Cooper Bird Sanctuary. But the label is a little incorrect because it looks like we own the whole mountainside where it's located. We do not own the whole mountainside. It's just 14 acres. This is situated near Catoctin Mountain Park, which is a National Park Service property, and Camp David. Sometimes access to the sanctuary is closed because when the president is in residence at Camp David, they close the local roads. Sometimes it's hard to get to. This is another property that was transferred to MOS from the Nature Conservancy, this one in 1978. It was given to the Nature Conservancy by Mrs. Seymour Cooper as a memorial to her husband, who apparently was quite an outdoorsman. The sanctuary is entirely wooded. It was previously logged, but hasn't been logged since long before MOS had it. So it has a good growth of woods on it now. There are no trails on the property, but the understory is open, so it's quite easy to walk through the sanctuary. This is our sanctuary property. It's a wedge-shaped piece of land. It goes uphill from the local road, which is here, Eilers Valley Road. And if you go in this direction, you're walking uphill, but it's a very moderate uphill. And when you get to the top of the hill, you hit a little patch of conifers, but most of it's deciduous woods. And we're surrounded, or on both sides, by private residences. There's a string of small private residential properties along this road. So the breeding species of this area, again, are significant. They're representative of Western Maryland, including broad-winged hawk, which is pictured in here on the right. And here are some photos showing the habitat at Seymour Cooper. And there's my husband, Gene, birding with some members of the Frederick Bird Club along the road by the edge of the sanctuary. It's very, very pleasant walking in there. This sanctuary, the land is very different than any of our other sanctuaries. The soils are very rocky. I'm not a geology person. I really don't know about different soil types and rock types, but it's a very distinctive feeling underfoot. You clearly know you're in a different kind of place than, say, Carey Run or Red Run or Caroline Wilson. Very different feel here. We now move a little more further east and south to come to Piscataway Sanctuary in my home county of Prince George's. This was donated to MOS by a developer in 2008. It consists of 82 wooded acres that protect a stream valley. And it's adjacent to a residential community that the developer was building out at the time he gave us this sanctuary. So the scenes here show, some of the habitat of the sanctuary. The streams here are significant in that they are in the Piscataway Creek and Potomac River watershed. The Piscataway Creek is one of the major tributaries of the Potomac in this region after the Potomac exits Washington, D.C., and the Piscataway is one of the it's one of the streams most in need of having its health protected in order to protect the water quality in the Potomac River. It goes through a lot of residential areas, so the Piscataway Creek has some problems. So this is our sanctuary. The border is here. Again, this is a wedge-shaped property. This is the development that it is adjacent to, and we actually have an entrance at the end of a cul-de-sac at that development. There's a little pavilion that was built for us by the developer and a gravel parking lot, and then we have a trail that goes downhill from the parking lot and runs along the stream valley. This is a one-way trail. You hit the end and you have to turn around and come back. We do have another trail that comes into the sanctuary from the south from a public park called Gardner Road Park. It's a county park. These two trails don't connect right now, but we're hoping to build a loop trail here and do some other work at the sanctuary. Although MOS acquired this property in 2008, we really haven't done anything with it because we haven't had a local manager. So we're looking for a local manager to help us get some work done at Piscataway. The breeding birds of this area include some water-oriented birds, including wood duck, red-shouldered hawk. Red-shouldered hawks eat a lot of amphibians, so as do barred owls. So some of these species are indicative of wet woods, which is what we have at Piscataway. Our photo is of a breeding pair of red-shouldered hawks at the sanctuary and an ovenbird over here. This is what it looks like at Piscataway. Let's see. This photo is of the trail coming in from the south from Gardner Road, as is this photo. And some of these other photos, this is another Gardner Road photo. This photo, and this bottom left photo are of the northern area of the sanctuary adjacent to the development. So showing both sections in this group of photos. Moving along, I'm watching my time, so I'll be galloping through the next couple of sanctuaries. Moving along, we get to Anne Arundel County, where we have a really tiny sanctuary called Mandaris Creek. This is our smallest sanctuary. It's just 8 acres. It's located on a bay of the Severn River. The name of this waterway has changed over the years. It used to be called Mandaris. Now the name that tends to be used is Manadir, but whatever. It's a little bay off of the Severn River. It's near Round Bay, if you know where that is. Herring Harbor, or not Herring Harbor. Can't think of the name of the place. This was donated to MOS in 1974 by a former president of MOS, Colonel William Bodenstein. It's the only, although it's tiny, it's significant because it's the only marsh habitat that MOS owns on the western shore of the Chesapeake Bay. There are no trails in this tiny little sanctuary. Most of it consists of Phragmites marsh. But near the road, which is River Road, running north and south, near the road there's a strip of woodland, and there's easy walking there because there's an open understory. And it's adjacent to a residential development. These are some photos of what the sanctuary looks like. This is a view from the road, River Road, passing the sanctuary. This shows a tidal creek called Deep Ditch, which flows out just at the south border of the sanctuary to enter the bay. This is our former sanctuary chair, Dominic Nucifora, getting a better view of the Phragmites marsh by standing on this log. But you can see the marsh has really filled in with Phragmites. When MOS first acquired this was mainly a cattail marsh, but now it's changed over to Phragmites. And this shows one of our great birds at the sanctuary, red-headed woodpecker. Dominic took this photo on a day that I was with him at the sanctuary in April of 2017. And that bird was almost close enough that we could reach out and touch it with our hands. It was just about 6 feet away from us in a little dead snag. The breeding birds, again, as you might expect, some of these are water-oriented birds or wet wood type birds. We do have bald eagles that breed nearby, and you can see them most anytime you visit. Wood ducks are another local breeder, and the photo is wood duck. So moving along, we've crossed the Bay Bridge now. Here's the Bay Bridge coming over from Sandy Point State Park. And we've crossed Kent Island, and now we're in the middle of the eastern shore where MOS has 3 sanctuaries. The first one we're going to visit is Mill Creek in Talbot County. So this was the second sanctuary that MOS purchased. The initial purchase was of 108 acres in 1964. MOS purchased some additional acreage in 1965 and 1971, and also received some land as a gift from Mrs. Royce Spring in 1965. She donated this land in honor of her husband. So the total sanctuary acreage is now 156 acres, and it consists of mixed deciduous and pine woods in the Mill Creek Valley. The photo here in the middle shows Mill Creek as it flows through the sanctuary. It's one of the significant streams of Talbot County. And we have a little covered pavilion that MOS built in the sanctuary. It's located in a wooded area off the road. You have to know where it is to get to it. It's very tucked away in the woods, but this wooded pavilion has some picnic tables and a fireplace in it, and it's used by the local chapter, the Talbot Bird Club, for some breakfast meetings and other activities. MOS was so excited, everybody in MOS was so excited when MOS first acquired this sanctuary. In 1964, a little hand-drawn map with pictographs of birds and other wildlife that you can find there. This graced the cover of Maryland Birdlife. And then again in 1971, there was another article in Maryland Birdlife about the sanctuary showing a hand-drawn map. There is State Route 662 bisects the sanctuary. It comes down from the north. It comes down from Route 50, makes an L turn, and then goes from west to east, comes back to Route 50 out here to the east. This is the creek flowing through the sanctuary, and MOS owns land both to the north and the south of Route 662. And there's a trail system that pervades the entire sanctuary. So Mill Creek is one of the sanctuaries that we know the most about, thanks to a biological survey that was performed starting in March 1984. Jan Reese, a local biologist, led a team that consisted of Paul Noel, Laurel Brown, and Jeff Effinger. They visited every 2 weeks for 14 months, and their goal was to take notes on every living thing that they found in the sanctuary. And they also made notes about soil types and so on. They researched the history of the sanctuary back to colonial days. They investigated the hydrology. So they ended up writing an 82-page report that gives us a baseline of the habitats and the wildlife using this sanctuary back in the 1980s. Now, there have been a lot of changes since then. So what we need to do is do this all over again and compare what we have now with what we had then. These are some photos from one of these is a historic photo of a activity at the covered pavilion back in the old days when the sanctuary was first acquired. We have some more recent photos of the local bird club convening at the sanctuary for a work day, building a bridge. They're here conferring on what they're going to do next. And here's the group that just built the bridge. We also do some trail marking activities there. We post the boundaries and so on. So Mill Creek is one of our sanctuaries that gets a good lot of use from the Talbot Bird Club and other birders, as well as other naturalists. One of the changes that has occurred in the sanctuary since the days when we first acquired it is the proliferation of the deer herd. Back in the early days, deer were not as numerous as they are now. So the deer, unfortunately, pretty much wiped out the entire understory at Mill Creek. Because of that, and because we wish to get these native plants that would normally grow in the understory back, we started leasing Mill Creek, to a local deer hunting guide who brings paying guests to Deer Creek, I keep calling it Deer Creek now, to Mill Creek for deer hunting. The sanctuary is closed to other visitors from September 1st to January 31st to span the hunting seasons for deer. And we started this 5 years ago. We are now seeing the fruits of our labors, or the fruits of the deer hunters' labors, in that the understory is starting to come back. So the plant roots are starting to regenerate, and it looks a little bit different now. We've got a better understory going. The breeding birds of Mill Creek, again, include some great species, including great blue heron. There has been a small rookery from time to time on the banks of Mill Creek. Bald eagles and ospreys also nest in the surrounding woods. And the photo is of a barred owl, and this is a gray catbird. There's lots of catbirds there. These are just some assorted scenes of the habitat. We have a small parking lot directly off of Route 662, and it's gated, but the gate is not locked. So anyone is welcome to go in there, park their car off the road, and then close the gate and walk around. This is a scene of one of the adjacent agricultural fields that is not owned by MOS, but we're looking out of our woods into the field. And it's pretty in the fall, too. So moving on from Mill Creek, the next sanctuary we're going to visit is also located in Talbot County. It's Marengo Woods. And again, parents aren't supposed to have favorites among their children, but I have to admit, I have a soft spot for Marengo Woods. There's just something I really like about it. And I think maybe what it is that it's mostly loblolly pine. And as soon as you walk into the sanctuary, the scent of pine just fills the air, and I really love it, I think, for that reason. There are mixed deciduous trees that are scattered among the loblollies, but loblolly is the predominant species. This sanctuary, you can see it here from the edge of the road. The sanctuary is surrounded by farm fields and some timber woodlots. Timbering is quite a source of income for local landowners in this area. It was donated to MOS in 1989 by a group of local landowners who got together to purchase the property in memory of two of their friends, and they wanted to preserve it from further logging. So the sanctuary sign, which is located on this stone monument, lists the donors of the property, and the two friends that it is in memory of are Margaret Shortle and Herbert Austin. There are no trails in here, but it's quite walkable because it has an open understory. The canopy is closed over, so there's not much understory here. But a warning, if you go there, it is wet much of the year. There are no streams in this sanctuary, but it has a lot of groundwater that sits on the surface. So the sanctuary, again, has an irregular kind of a wedge shape with a point at the top, and it fronts on two roads. This is Gregory Road and Marengo Road. It's in the Miles River Neck area of Talbot County. We put in a small parking lot last year, shown here in the photo. Until this parking lot was put in, we had no parking at the sanctuary, and visiting was quite a chore because we had no place to park. But now we do, so visiting is easy. And as I said, there aren't any trails, but it's easy to walk through the whole thing. The breeding species of this area include, again, bald eagle, a couple of owls, red-headed woodpecker, brown-headed nuthatches can be found at the sanctuary. And this is a black vulture that I took a photo of. They apparently breed in the woods there. And these are some photos showing the interior of the sanctuary. I mentioned that it's quite wet for much of the year. This is one of the, I'm drawing a blank on the name, one of this is not a stream, this is one of the pools, vernal pool, there we go, vernal pool, but it's not really just springtime. It does persist through much of the summer and into fall and winter. And you can see the understory is quite open in some places, so it's quite easy to walk around. This is a photo from inside the sanctuary looking out to an adjacent agricultural field that is not owned by MOS. Our land is entirely wooded. Moving on, there's one more sanctuary we want to visit in this part of the Eastern Shore. It's Myrtle Simon's Pilo Sanctuary in Carey County. It's very near the Delaware state line, which is this north-south border. This is located between the towns of Greensboro and Goldsboro in Carey County. Myrtle Simon's Pilo Sanctuary has an irregular outline. It follows the stream called Gravelly Branch that runs right through the heart of the sanctuary, and the outline of the sanctuary follows the bends of the stream. Gravelly Branch is a tributary of the Choptank River, which is over here to the west. You can't see it on this map, but it's one of the major tributaries and one of the best preserved tributaries of the Choptank River. This is a hand-drawn map of the sanctuary. It was drawn by one of the Caroline Bird Club members, showing two trails, one in the south part, south of Gravelly Branch. That trail still exists. There also used to be a trail shown in blue along the northern border. I have to say that trail is mostly grown over and is not navigable these days. So that trail has pretty much been abandoned. Mrs. Pilo, who the sanctuary is named after, was a member of the Caroline Bird Club who passed away in 1971. She did not own this property that we have as the sanctuary. She owned a house in the town of Ridgely that sat on 1 acre, and she left that property, her house, to MOS. There were no restrictions on the property, and MOS had no use for a house on an acre in a town. So MOS sold the house and land and got $34,000 for it and used those proceeds to purchase the sanctuary property in 1973. The sanctuary is approximately 61 acres, all of which are wooded. This is Gravelly Branch flowing through the sanctuary, through the middle of the sanctuary. And this is a photo along the trail that runs along the southern edge of the sanctuary. As I mentioned, Gravelly Branch is significant because it is, I don't think we have any streams in Maryland that you can really call pristine, but it's near pristine, so it's in very good shape. The sanctuary and the surrounding area hosts a good selection of about 80 breeding species, including prothonotary warbler, that beautiful warbler that's pictured here, and summer tanager, a specialty of southern Maryland. And here's some final scenes showing you what the habitat looks like at Pilo. Pilo, like Mill Creek used to be before the deer wiped out the understory, Pilo is known for its native wildflowers and blooming plants. So here we have some native azalea that's in bloom. Here we have columbine, the local Canadian columbine. And here we've got some Caroline Bird Club members enjoying the sanctuary. We have a little seating area near the stream where people can gather. And that brings us to the 10th one of the MOS sanctuaries, Irish Grove, located in Somerset County. We have a house at Irish Grove that, like the house at Carey Run, is available for overnight stays by MOS members. Irish Grove is nothing short of spectacular. It's located as far south in Maryland as you can get. It's located on the Pocomoke Sound. If it were any farther south, it would be in Virginia. In fact, when you look across the sound, you see Virginia. So it's located quite far south on the eastern shore of Maryland in Somerset County. And we consider it the jewel in the crown of our sanctuary system. It is, as I said, just spectacular. It's predominantly salt marsh. It consists of, at this time, over 2,300 acres. There are tidal streams that flow through the property, both fresh and saltwater ponds. The freshwater ponds are fed by rainwater. There are extensive plots of loblolly pines and deciduous trees as well. There's about 45 acres that we maintain in fields. We have extensive infrastructure, including viewing platforms, trails, bridges, low platforms, a barn that we use as a social gathering center. Part of the barn is screened and serves as a picnic area. And we need the screens because this place is great for every biting insect known to man. deer flies, mosquitoes, horse flies, they're all there, and they will drain you dry if you visit between April and November. So we have all of our activities during that time period in the screened area. The house on the property was built around 1890. These are some overhead views taken from both drone and plane of Irish Grove to indicate really how vast it is. It just goes on forever. This is a tax map that shows the extent of Irish Grove in blue. The dots, it consists of a number of parcels that were acquired over the years, and the dots show the parcel points. But normal size properties are located around Irish Grove, but Irish Grove is just huge compared to the other properties surrounding the area. There is a major tributary, East Creek, that flows through a portion of the sanctuary, and many, many streams and tidal guts that feed that stream, that feed East Creek. The house is located up here. Here. And here's an overhead of the house and its outbuildings. This is the third sanctuary that was purchased by MOS. The original purchase was of just over 1,400 acres in 1968 at a cost of $80,000. That was a lot of cash in those days. And MOS, I won't say that they thought hard. Everybody agreed that it had to be bought in order to preserve it. The difficulty was coming up with the cash. So half of that amount was mortgaged. Again, just like with Carey Run, that mortgage was paid off within 3 years through a very active fundraising program. There was additional acreage that MOS purchased in 1971, 2008, and 2017. And we also received a significant gift of 148 acres in 1992 from the Eastern Shore Land Trust. Even more significant, we received a gift of 715 acres in 2019, including the marsh at Rumbly Point, which is the point of land that sits on Pocomoke Sound. That 715 acres came from a couple of private landowners in the area who are incorporated as a hunting club. They've been good friends to MOS over the years, and as they're reaching their older years, they're starting to disperse their holdings, so they gave this land to MOS. So we now have over 2,300 acres there. And this photo, date unknown, shows Chan Robbins, there he is again, putting in some elbow grease by doing some caulking and painting on the house at Irish Grove. This is before we covered the asbestos shingles, which came with the house, with vinyl siding. These are some photos showing the beauty of Irish Grove. And honestly, every time I visit there, every time I walk the trails, I'm just awestruck by how gorgeous it is. And, Gene will tell you, my husband Gene will tell you, I go around a corner and I stop dead to take pictures because it's just so pretty. As I mentioned, we have an extensive trail system. This is one of our main trails that leads from the house into the marsh system. Here's another portion of that trail. We have some short boardwalk areas here and here, a little viewing platform here. This is one of the tidal pools. This is just looking out over the marsh. And here's a rough green snake that Sue Riccardi, one of the Sanctuary Committee members, and I found during one of our walks last fall. And here's, we've named some of the significant trails after some of our Sanctuary Committee volunteers. This one is named Dottie Lane after Dottie Mumford, shown on the right, who was the Sanctuary Committee chair for a number of years. And Irish Grove was her favorite sanctuary. This shows some of our trail system, not all of it. The house is located here, and the trails extend out from the house for the most part. Rumbly Point Road is this public road that runs north-south. It goes all the way down to Pocomoke Sound through land owned by MOS. But the white trails here can be driven in a car. This one, I've driven part of it. I'm not so sure I would drive the circle part anymore. It's getting a little iffy down there because of sea level rise. The purple trails are meant to be foot trails. Some of them are also quite wet, and boots are recommended for all users. But they do take you out into the marsh and show you those spectacular vistas that we have. I wanted to talk about marsh migration. You all know about climate change and sea level rise, and we're experiencing that. We see it happening at Irish Grove. This is a trail map of Irish Grove from the 1980s. It's a hand-drawn trail map that shows some trails actually going from the house here through the marsh north of the house to another house that we used to have. That other house is now in ruins up at the north end of the sanctuary. That trail is no longer navigable. It is underwater. So these trails are no longer maintained. It would be dangerous to walk out there into the marsh, either north or south of the house. And what we're experiencing because of sea level rise is that what is the habitat that is known as low marsh is replacing what used to be high marsh. The high marsh is only flooded on the highest tides, whereas low marsh is flooded almost all the time. And so that's what's happening. We're having marsh migration that we're experiencing at Irish Grove. We're also experiencing the death of some trees that are in the northern part of the sanctuary. These trees they don't like having their feet wet, which they do now. And so we're seeing what are known as ghost forests along the northern parts of the sanctuary. Irish Grove has and is a busy place. This shows a group using that screened in picnic area in that pole barn that I mentioned. Here we've got people on the roof of the house doing some roofing work. This is a photo from a sanctuary work day last year. So we're still very active at the sanctuary. We get large groups of volunteers coming out to help us take care of the sanctuary. In fact, I want to mention that if any of you are interested, our next work weekend at Irish Grove is November 4th through the 6th, the first weekend of November. And the house will be available for overnight stays or outdoor camping during that weekend. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip through some of these slides fairly quickly here. Here are interior shots of the house showing it's really quite livable. It's basic, it's kind of rustic, but it's very livable. There's Dottie Mumford, our former sanctuary chair, in the kitchen, where she was always in charge of the meals for Irish Grove. These are some of the special birds we find at Irish Grove. Many, many birds breed in the marshes, as you can imagine. The breeding bird surveys, or the breeding bird atlas, has shown over 80 breeding species, including some really distinctive species. Black rail used to breed there. They no longer do. Like everywhere else, black rails have died out at Irish Grove. But Irish Grove covers 4 atlas blocks, so doing any atlas work there is really difficult because some of these blocks are hard to get to. You're talking about low marsh, getting out in the low marsh. Here we have Saltmarsh sparrow and seaside sparrow in the upper photo. They are both breeders at the sanctuary. To leave you at Irish Grove, just to show again the beauty of Irish Grove, we've got a couple of photos by Paul Bystrack, who has worked at Irish Grove as a volunteer since he was a teenager. And he's no longer a teenager. He's a retired man now. But he went there with Chan Robbins as a volunteer when MOS first acquired the property, and he's been volunteering there ever since. So we've visited all of the MOS sanctuaries from west to east. I just want to give you a little bit more information about the sanctuaries before we say goodnight. I wanted to talk about the conservation value of the sanctuaries in just a few quick minutes. As you probably are aware, Maryland DNR has a lot of digital mapping and databases that enable DNR and private landowners like us to do some investigation of what areas are most valuable for wildlife conservation. And so this map shows 5 prioritized tiers called the BioNet Conservation Diversity Tiers. They are labeled, Tier 1 is in red. All the red dots are the highest level of value for biodiversity conservation. And then we get down to the green ones. All of the tiers are important for conservation. Tier 5 is just less important than the Tier 1s. So one thing I wanted to use this map to show is that all of the MOS sanctuaries are located in areas that are coded by Maryland DNR of being of value, high conservation value for biodiversity in the state of Maryland. We have no throwaway sanctuaries, even though some of them were gifts to us. They're all important for biodiversity conservation. And to bring that point home again, I wanted to show you, if we just look, there are many parameters that DNR uses to produce those digital maps. There are lots of numbers that they crunch and algorithms that they use. But one of the numbers that they use is called the Biodiversity Potential Index. It's a scale of 0 to 100. And you can see that all of the MOS sanctuaries score pretty high up in the biodiversity index. Ironically, Carey Run, which we think has great biodiversity, actually is one of the lowest scoring, is the lowest scoring. And that's because of the field habitat there, which DNR codes very low as being important for diversity. They're mainly thinking of agricultural fields. Our fields at Carey Run are no longer agricultural. So we need to get them to adjust that number a little bit. I also wanted to say, because we do value biodiversity on the sanctuaries, we monitor data other than bird data. And I'm just going to run through these next slides very quickly. We have Herp Atlas data for all of the sanctuaries. And the chart shows the different sanctuaries running across the columns. These are toads and frogs that are found on the sanctuaries, as shown by the dots. You can see which frogs occur where. As you might expect, the mountainous sanctuaries have fewer species than the eastern shore sanctuaries, for example, when you come to toads and frogs. Salamanders, on the other hand, are more common in the mountainous habitats than they are on the western and eastern shores of Maryland. Here we have lizards and turtles. Again, these are mainly found in the lower elevations. And finally, we have snakes. Some snakes are found pretty much everywhere, like eastern garter snake. Others, specific snakes are found in specific sanctuaries. Mandary's Creek, that tiny little place, is one of the best areas to find snakes. So is Irish Grove, and that photo of the rough green snake was from Irish Grove. I also wanted to mention that MOS supports research at the sanctuaries, either done by our own members or by outside groups. So in 2019, we had a BioBlitz in partnership with the Maryland Entomological Society at Carey Run. There are ongoing nocturnal insect surveys at Carey Run, the robins at Red Run Sanctuary, Mill Creek, and Irish Grove. These are being conducted by individual people, including Sue Muller, Dave Webb, and Jim Brighton from the Maryland Biodiversity Project. Sam Droege is doing native bee surveys at Mill Creek on an ongoing basis. He's there almost every weekend to do bee trapping. Water temperature monitoring by the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center is being conducted at Pilo Sanctuary last year and this year. They're interested in Gravelly Branch, which runs through Pilo, because it seems to be one of the few tributaries of the Choptank River that is capable of having water temperatures in a range that will support migratory fish species. And so they're also doing some fish sampling. Smithsonian Environmental Research Center is doing some fish sampling in the stream at Pilo. At Irish Grove, MOS is working in partnership with DNR to put up barn owl nest boxes and monitor breeding by barn owls in the marshes at Irish Grove. At Carey Run, we have our longest running project, which is bluebird nest monitoring. That project has been in existence continuously since the 1960s, and it's conducted by Frostburg University students. So the sanctuaries provide a lot of opportunities to us, as we've seen. We can conserve birds in their habitats. We can use them for casual birding and other nature studies. I wanted to remember to say that the grounds are open to the public on a daily basis. You just walk right in. We encourage, in fact, everyone to use the sanctuaries. They can be used for group outings and organized field trips, as well as individual visits. We sponsor scientific research at the sanctuaries. We conduct educational products. And in Chan's words, we're sowing the seeds of conservation so that more of Maryland's citizens will learn to appreciate the natural areas of our state and in turn help to preserve more of these areas for the enjoyment of future generations. I am just going to skip through these next slides except to say, if you wish to volunteer, please contact Jeremy Castle, who is he is in the meeting tonight. He's the chair of our Sanctuary Committee, and any and all help will be gratefully accepted, including donations. And with your help, we can have a bright future for the MOS Sanctuaries. There are some resources for further information about the sanctuaries. I put these links in the chat right at the beginning of the meeting, so you can find them there if you're interested in following up. And in particular, the Birder's Guide will give you directions, Google Maps, trail maps, and so on for the all 10 of the MOS sanctuaries. And my voice is telling me to stop talking, so I'm going to stop with one more slide honoring our sanctuary volunteers. And I will stop talking there. So Bronwyn, I don't know how you want to handle questions and answers, or if we even have any time. What do you want to do?
Yeah, let's unshare. Thank you, Marcia, so much. We have a little bit of time for questions. If you want to ask a question, you can put it in the chat box or raise your hand, and I will call on you to unmute. But I want to, on behalf of everybody here, thank you, Marcia, and you are a wonderful tour guide. I want to book a trip to all of them, and right now, and I want to go see them all.
Oh, they're great.
And I can't wait to figure out ways to get some of our the Natural History Society folks in there, especially our Herp Club and our Lepidoptera Club. Maybe we can go in and do some biological monitoring as well to help understand better, what's going on in each of those sanctuaries. And it's just an excuse to get outside, but we don't need an excuse, but there's one anyway. Any questions for Marcia?
Well, I just wanted to say too, since our sanctuary chair Jeremy is in the meeting, Jeremy, did you have any comments that you wanted to add?
Nothing to add. I included my email in the chat, so if anybody has anything to reach out with volunteering at our upcoming work weekend at Irish Grove, or any questions or comments, or if you're interested in doing any types of surveys or research, then feel free to reach out to me.
We will be in touch.
Perfect.
I had a question. You kind of mentioned it before, but I had two questions. One, it was about the field. Are you actively managing any of the properties for ground nesting birds or anything like that? That birds that in Maryland need some help because of habitat loss. Are you actively utilizing the sites for managing and for those specific species?
We are. The three sanctuaries that are most intensively managed, and I don't even know if intensively is the right word, but conscientiously managed, I think is a good word, intentionally managed, would be Carey Run, Mill Creek, and Irish Grove. At Carey Run and Irish Grove, we intentionally keep our fields mown once a year for field birds, some of which are ground nesting. And also, as I mentioned with Mill Creek, the reason we're having deer hunting there is to enhance the ground cover, because the ground cover is where ground nesting birds nest. A lot of warblers nest on the ground, but you need ground cover to support them. So, without the ground cover, you can't have them. So yes, I will say that at the other sanctuaries, they're pretty much left alone except for trail maintenance. So the other sanctuaries do not have field habitat, and really, we pretty much let the woods be. In some places, we do have invasive species issues that we're going to have to address sooner or later, but the other sanctuaries do not require as intense management.
And then the other question was just especially the issues with climate change and how they're affecting that. I mean, we're all dealing with it, but just asking what plans are in place, if any.
Well, the sanctuary that's going to be the most, it already is affected by climate change and sea level rise, is Irish Grove. And as I said, we're already seeing that. The house sits on a hummock of land that has higher elevation. What we're going to lose first is the road that goes down to Rumbly Point. It's already, there are days when you can't get down that road. The surface of the road, once you get past the house, as you head south past the house, the surface of the road is sand, and it is a public road maintained by the county. At the end of the road, there's a small plot that MOS does not own. It's a hunting lodge on 5 acres right at the very point. There are some days when you cannot get to the lodge because the road is underwater. So when high tides come in, the road's just not passable. Occasionally when we're down there working at the sanctuary, we have to haul people out of the road because teenagers go down there to party and they get themselves in trouble. So yeah, that's the one that's most imminently threatened. The next one will be Mill Creek. Mill Creek, the sanctuary itself sits on higher ground, but Mill Creek, the stream, is going to start showing changes to the stream habitat and ecology because of sea level rise. It's not far off the Chesapeake Bay. So yeah, those are the two where we're going to see it first.
All right. Well, I agree with Suzanne here. Fantastic presentation. Everybody can't wait to go visit. And they're putting it on their Google sites to go to. So you did your job. And everybody, does anybody have any other questions, or we will call it an evening? And look forward to going out. Sorry for that. I'm at home. Going out and exploring more of these wonderful sanctuaries. We're so grateful for the Maryland Ornithological Society for having these resources for us to explore and use, and we look forward to ways that we can help you keep these wonderful treasures available for us all.
We'd love to see you all out there. Maybe a BioBlitz.
I love BioBlitzing, so yes, I would love to do that.
That would be great. Okay. Thank you again for hosting. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Yeah, take care, everybody. Stay well, stay curious, and stay outside. Okay, go visit the sanctuaries. All right. Support MOS.